Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Class A Threat by Dan Sugralinov, translated by Andrew Schmidt, narrated by Daniel Thomas May. Chapter 1. Sandbox. For my birthday, my parents got me an Infinitum 8. Not a very expensive model of immersion pod, but one of the best in its class. It was the present I most wanted for my 14th birthday because that is the age you can finally start playing the coolest and most popular game on the planet, Disgardium. As soon as the birthday party was over and the guests had left, Dad smiled. "Can't wait to test it out?" I nodded. How could I? An immersion pod is not some steam-powered VR helmet with sensor gloves. "Go on then, Alex," Mom said and laughed, embracing Dad. "Don't go in too long your first time," he shouted after me. "Alex?" "Yes, Dad," I answered, almost running to my room where the new pod awaited me. Just think, it was already installed, calibrated, and ready to use. I hurriedly got undressed and went inside. It was vertical, but could change orientation to better reflect the virtual world. Gravity is a heartless little bitch, and it's difficult to convince someone that they're standing when their real body is horizontal. I grabbed the metal handles and waited. A few seconds passed, but nothing happened. Was this thing defective? I was about to run down and call the manufacturer when a stern voice rang out in the pod. "Alex, your heartbeat is too rapid for your first immersion experience. Access denied." "Oh, come on!" I shouted. "Apologies for the inconvenience, but characters can only be generated in baseline physical state," the voice muttered, probably quoting the user's manual. Then it followed up with some helpful advice. "Alex, please do your best to calm down and try again. Thank you." With a sigh, I climbed out of the pod and walked out onto the little balcony off my room. There were all kinds of silvery delivery drones flitting about on the backdrop of the starry sky, landing and taking off from the windows of our huge residential complex. Higher up, a procession of public flying cars darkened the sky. As of today, I was legally allowed to pilot them without computer control. I couldn't wait to try it out. Of course, I would have to pass the license test first, but I had no doubts about that. A cloud of condensation burst out of my mouth. The cold, damp wind made me shiver even though earlier today it was pretty clearly turning to spring. A few minutes later, I was calm and back in the pod. This time I saw no warnings, and the immersion process was able to initiate. Intragel flooded the pod, going over my head, but it was perfectly all right to breathe. Finally, I closed my eyes. And when I opened them again, I was in outer space. The sensation of weightlessness took my breath away, and I could barely resist waving my arms and legs. Not that there was much reason to. The pod assumed control over my muscles, keeping them static, while the intragel kept my body suspended and out of harm's way. That way, if something went wrong and it lost control of my body, the gel would protect me from injury. "Good evening, Alex. Please select your preferred immersion environment." The text was immediately read out by a breathy female voice. In terms of environments, there wasn't much choice. I had the moon-sized test world infinitum, made to demonstrate the pod's capabilities, or the huge Disgardium, which came factory pre-installed on all pods. And that was what I chose. Some system logs ran before my eyes. Biological age confirmed. Access to Disgardium permitted. Notifying Department of Education. Complete. Status confirmed. Initiating first immersion experience. Scanning body. Complete. Character appearance generated. Approved world type. Sandbox. Recommended location. Tristad. Unfortunately, I would be relegated to a sandbox until I reached 16. They were private locations where only underage players were allowed. Adults from the full version were not permitted, and all content was strictly age-appropriate. All around me, I saw a flurry of majestic cities and abandoned villages, epic battles and ghastly monsters, the 6 not yet entirely explored continents, heavenly gardens and fiery wastelands, 1 billion active players and just as many non-player characters, which was to say nothing of non-citizen workers, seaside resorts and city blocks teeming with forbidden pleasures. Welcome to Disgardium, Alex. Welcome to a world where dozens of non-human races live in harmony. A world where sword and magic reign. A world where anyone could one day become a king or hero. A world where you'll want to live. A world where fate... I didn't even think of interrupting the intro, savoring the massive scale and brilliant colors of this world that was so recently off limits. I had been dreaming of this moment for far too long. The primer on Disgardium came to an end. I was immersed in darkness for an instant, and then suddenly found myself in a room full of people. It was a few boys and girls. We were all wearing identical canvas garb and looking around in surprise. I was just overcome and couldn't hide my glee. It was all so real. The wooden floor creaked underfoot, rafters peeked out from behind the high ceiling, and light from the windows jumped along the walls, playing off our shadows. I could smell a sappy tree. Dust whirled in the rays of the sun. The canvas shirt fit loosely over my body, and when I touched it, I could feel my ribs through the fabric. Unbelievable. "Whoa!" shrieked a girl with long black hair. "Who pinched me?" Everyone laughed. The girl sneezed, and that caused a new burst of laughter. "Happy birthday, all!" I shouted. "Happy birthday!" rang out discordantly through the laughter. All of us had just reached our 14th year, that was obvious. Who in their right mind would put off their first taste of Disgardium? "Hey, wait a minute. Shouldn't we be seeing our names?" "We haven't even generated characters yet, dummy." In our feverish anticipation, we didn't notice it first, but the door had opened.
"Welcome, new visitors of Tristad,"
came a sonorous male voice. We turned. In the doorway, hiding a smile in his whiskers, there stood a respectable man with graying locks. Over him hovered the words, Peter Whiteacre, Level 30, Chief Councilman of the City of Tristad.
"It is my pleasure to welcome you to the free city of Tristad, where everyone has a place, be they hero or warrior, bard or wise man, hunter or mage, druid or common quarry worker."
The councilman listed a few more series of classes and professions. Then he ran down the list of races inhabiting the Commonwealth.
"And we are equally glad to see people, elves, and gnomes."
For my part, I was quite engaged. Studying information online was one thing, but finally becoming part of all this was another. The councilman then gave us a brief overview of the state of the world. All races of the Commonwealth were at war with hordes of orcs and barbaric non-human tribes. They also repelled raids from the Nether and the senseless attacks of the Reavers, and resisted the Dark Brotherhoods, the Sleeping Gods, the Goblin League. Lots of things happened in this world, and it was possible that some of us would remain in the Commonwealth after transitioning to the adult world. Others would certainly take the chance and change their character to a different faction, though.
"I can see that you're all tired from the long journey,"
Whiteacre said finally.
"Now please complete your registration with Carlson the scribe. Then I'll answer any questions you may have. If you have no questions, go out and see the city, meet its inhabitants, and bring it good fortune."
We started heading toward the registration desk. There was a plump, rosy-cheeked scribe sitting there. I took up the back of the line. "Complete these arrival forms," said Carlson, handing them out. That paper, once in hand, unfolded into a character registration form. In a sandbox, you could only play a person, so it wasn't clear why Whiteacre had listed all the races of the Commonwealth. And we could only choose a class at level 10, so now we could only fill in our name and allocate attribute points. There was a name I was planning to use for a long time, ever since my dad read me tales from ancient history as bedtime stories. Name, Scyth. Confirmed. I might have said it had no meaning, but that wasn't true. I hope I can live up to the name. Scyth. You have 15 main attribute points. In many ways, your attributes will determine your entire life in Disgardium, from your combat strategy to the way others perceive you. Take your time and think carefully. Your attributes cannot be reset. In school, I heard that no matter what class you choose, you need a 10 at least in every attribute. Strength, so I could carry lots of weight. Agility and perception, so I wouldn't miss my targets and land critical hits. Intelligence defined mana regeneration, and mana was used to make special attacks, even for warriors. And with low charisma, I could forget about good quests and discounts from vendors. Luck, meanwhile, had a small impact on just about everything. So then, after some brief thought, I put 2 into each one. I added the extra point to endurance without really thinking, just because it was there. Scyth, level 1 human. Real name, Alex Shepard. Real age, 14. Class, not selected. Main attributes, strength, 2. Perception, 2. Endurance, 3. Charisma, 2. Intelligence, 2. Agility, 2. Luck, 2. All finished. I handed my arrival form to the scribe. He scanned it, snorted, and gave a strained smile and, with exaggerated enthusiasm, announced, "Welcome to Tristad, Scyth." When I emerged, I stopped on the stairs, looking down the central street dreamily and smiling. Disgardium, say hello to your new hero. Chapter 2. A year and a half later. There was only 5 minutes left in class, and the students were starting to get restless.
"The bell hasn't rung yet,"
Greg Kovacs, our history teacher, noted sternly.
"Take your seats. Edward, sit down this instant."
Ed Rodriguez, leader of the Dementors clan, was scraping his desk along the floor. He quickly sat back down despite himself. Modern history was our last lesson for today, and he just couldn't wait to get back into Disgardium.
"I'm not finished," Greg frowned. "All right, kids, class is extended by 2 minutes. You know who to thank."
"But teacher," Ed objected, "Mr. Kovacs."
"No buts, Rodriguez."
Tissa, the blonde girl sitting behind Ed, hissed out something that sounded very much like shit. She was in Ed's clan, and seemingly they had a raid scheduled today.
"Let's make that 3 minutes, Melissa Schaefer."
The teacher corrected himself nonchalantly. He continued the lecture.
"After the collapse of the world banking system."
Tissa rolled her eyes and gave a loud sigh, not unclenching her lips. Ed, turning around, blew her a kiss. Tissa shot him a middle finger back.
"The UN,"
Greg said, writing the name on the whiteboard and underlining it.
"That led to the creation of the Worldwide Bank and the Global Monetary Union. Who can tell me what their new unit of currency was called?"
"The Phoenix," the class answered in unison.
"Exactly," the teacher nodded. "And who knows what a phoenix looks like?"
Silence. Knowing Mr. Kovacs, it was better to answer. Otherwise, we could end up sitting here for half an hour. "The phoenix is a mythological bird that can burn itself up and rise from the ashes," I said. "The first written mention of the phoenix myth is found in Herodotus."
"I appreciate your knowledge of mythology, Alex, but I was asking about the currency. The phoenix doesn't have a material form. It is a digital currency, independent of economic and political considerations. In the same year, another important change took place in society."
He had moved on to the mandatory citizenship tests. Ours would be coming soon enough, and Greg touched on the pitiful existence non-citizens were shackled to, the fact that they outnumbered citizens, and that they were dying en masse, abandoned and forgotten by society. But by the end, no one was listening anymore. For the last seconds of our extra minutes, we were drumming on our desks and shouting out a countdown. 3, 2, 1... The thunder of every chair scooting back at once drowned out our homework assignment and the date of an upcoming test. The Dementors were the first out of class, driven on by Ed. They took Disgardium seriously because they saw it as their future. Snowstorm Incorporated, the developer, was the first company to ever pay people to game. And since then, it is the most widely played full immersion game on Earth, even receiving certification from the United Nations itself. And now it was where non-citizens and underqualified citizens spent their days and earned their money. For many, it was the only way to improve their lot in life. But definitely not for me. It had been a year and a half since I first loaded up Dis. I remember thinking I was very clever investing equally in all attributes. How wrong I was. That gave me a character with piss-poor damage and dispiriting aim. I was hardly fit to live. Unfortunately, even though I had read a few guides before my first session, I never read the best way to make a new character. I knew that every level would give me 5 attribute points, so I figured if anything was wrong, I could just fix it in no time at all. Gaining just a few levels seemed trivial. But it wasn't all puppies and rainbows. Bots were in no rush to give me quests, and farming mobs turned out to not only be tedious but difficult. Level 1 rats refused to be easy farming and took me down in a couple of bites every time. I had to land 10 or so blows, constantly swinging just to take down one. And that was if I had someone holding the rat for me. And when I joined a group of beginners like me, those drips of experience turned into mere dewdrops. When I realized that, my enthusiasm was extinguished. And this wasn't exactly an uncommon experience. Some just stopped playing. Others opted for social quests. But leveling like that was hopelessly boring and never-ending. Just to get 1 experience point, for example, you had to spend a few hours doing social labor like cleaning stables or pulling weeds. Half a year in the game to get a couple levels? Oh, never. And one day I quit the game. But the next I was inspired by the success of a few classmates and entered again with new hopes and plans. But the longer I played, the more disenchanted I grew. At the beginning, I couldn't get any equipment, armor, or weapons. The lowliest knife in the weapons store cost a few silver, and I'd have had to complete 50 social quests to get just 1 silver coin. Fight rats with my bare hands? Ha! Those things were so big they'd have the upper hand on a Rottweiler IRL. And even if I could kill one, the reward was just 1 experience point, maybe 2 if I got really lucky. So in the end, I just couldn't stand it. After a few weeks trying every which way to level, my experience bar was no more than 5% full. I didn't even hit level 2. For some reason known only to the developers, it was impossible to delete a character and create a new one from scratch in sandboxes. Maybe that was to make us take more responsibility for our decisions. Meanwhile, I was disgusted by the idea of spending real money on the game both then and now. I mean, I knew how hard up my parents were for cash. It wasn't like basic gear would cost some astronomical amount, but by the time I considered it, Dis had already lost its charm to me. Sure, at first it was fun to explore a totally new world with its own laws, rules, geography, history, and races. It even had different physics, given both magic and teleportation were possible. But that was only truly enthralling for the first few days. Weeding or respawning time and again after the fatal bite of some overgrown spider? No thanks. What was more, my heart yearned for outer space. The first settlements were being made on Mars, and it seemed to me that exploring a real new world was somewhat more interesting than a virtual one. I greedily devoured any materials I could find about space expeditions, studied the requirements for getting into university, and prepared for exams. My parents supported my ambitions too, and had set some money aside for my studies. But I still had to play Dis, and every day. From the age of 14, everyone was required to spend at least 1 hour per day in the game. Snowstorm Inc.'s long tendrils reached deep into the UN Department of Education. Now it was thought to be an important part of a child's education, providing necessary social skills and preparing us for adult life, whether in the real world or Disgardium. Every day was exactly the same for me there. I usually spent the whole hour sitting on a bench opposite the bubbling Flagon Tavern. Just after I entered the game, the neighbor girl, Eve O'Sullivan, would come join me. She couldn't stand even a hint of pain, so she didn't find the game much fun either. And for that reason, she would sit around killing time with me. The sooner we got our citizenship tests, the better. After that, I could be done with this onerous requirement. With that thought in mind, I hurried to leave school. Our parking lot had a limited number of public flying cars, and if you didn't manage to get one on your first go-round, you'd have to wait for one to come back. And that's just what happened. Or, more accurately, one of the last ones still had an empty seat, but I wanted one to myself so I could drive it manually. The school lot was on the roof, next to a solar panel array. Eve was sitting there. She always waited for me so we could fly home together. Her father's business was really taking off, but they were still in our apartment complex. "Alex!" Eve's face lit up. I might have thought she liked me, but that didn't do anything for me. She was sweet, but not at all to my taste. Plus, she didn't mind her figure, eating chocolate bars in quantities that far surpassed Department of Health guidelines. "How was your day?" "Like normal, Eve. 2 periods of ethics of modern society, 2 of programming domestic robots, and 2 of modern history. Dullsville." "Oh, God, I never understood why we need history," she shouted. Then she changed her voice, trying to parody Greg's distinctive manner of speaking. "The last president of the United States." Eve got distracted and started thinking. I threw off the backpack and sat down next to her. All the flying cars were gone, so we would have to wait here at least 10 minutes. Then a tarry column of acrid bitumen shot up into the air from the asphalt of the launch pad. "That damned dis again," she sighed. "When are you going to play today? Right after you eat like normal?" The sooner I start, the sooner I can finish. Then I can do whatever I want." "So, what would you rather be doing?" Eve asked, emphasizing the word rather. She even attempted a languid tone, drawing out the last word and cocking an eye. Oh, nether. Flirting was definitely not her strong suit. Where had she seen that move? Nevertheless, I was caught off guard. "Probably not what you had in mind," I answered with a smile. I didn't want to offend her. She was a great girl, and I had known her since childhood. "I'll be studying materials on the Lehman expedition to Mars." "I see. I just thought maybe you'd want to—" "What?" I didn't want to embarrass her, but it was better to break this off before it turned into an upwelling of unjustified hope. Maybe we could watch it together?" she blurted out in one breath. "Sorry, not today. My parents are working on a new project. I don't want us to distract them." I tactically said us, although I meant only her. My father and mother had finally gotten an easy order, but the client was fickle and it was best to keep risks to a minimum. Money had been tight for us recently. Dad suspected Mom was having an affair, which was driving him more and more to the bottle, and when he drank he got paranoid, suspicious, and aggressive. Mom, of course, didn't like that, and so she left home on the sly and came back around morning. I definitely think she's seeing someone. Their constant fighting ruined my mood so much I didn't even want to do my homework. And that was a problem. To get into university, I need high average points. "We can watch it at my place." Eve wouldn't relent. "We can talk about that later," I answered, hoping that by then her spark would have gone out. Flying cars began returning to the parking lot. We got into one, and I gave a nod to Eve. "So, are you flying or the computer?" "Me." I changed steering to manual and took off into the air. Flying. What could be better? Only the stars.
Chapter 3. Bad News.
After eating, I went on dis. Eve and I sat on the bench across from the bubbling Flagon Tavern, which was, by the way, the only one in all of Tristat. We just chatted and looked around. The city had a rhythm all its own. Players ran around willy-nilly, coursing between the market square, bank, and the auction. There was so much noise that 20 minutes after loading, I truly wished I could know what it was like to be deaf. Everyone around was screaming, arguing, negotiating, inviting people to groups, and just-formed clans. The energetic whooping of criers and barkers for local merchants and craftsmen cut into the din. Maneuvering between them all was a challenge with my low attributes. Couriers and other low-level players were darting here and there, carrying out social quests for the city. And they all ignored the red-faced, town-drunk Patrick, just pretending that he didn't exist. That's how much he bothered everyone. That unlovable bot was always begging for a copper. Yet there were rumors that if you cranked your reputation with him up to max, you could get some legendary quest. But few had tried because, at a rate of 1 rep per copper, it was too steep for most noobs. A bit further down the street, some restless gnomes were causing a ruckus with a group of dignified dwarves. Even from so far away, I could tell that they were negotiating to buy some new gnomish invention, and both were driving a hard bargain. A city guardsman was standing at the entrance to the tavern, watching passers-by like a hawk. By the way, in the Sandbox taverns, players were only served cream beer. No alcohol. Explicit language was bleeped and penalized with experience points, too. What was more, it wasn't even possible to get fully undressed here. Instead of sex organs, we all had nothing down there, like a child's doll. Too bad, of course. I had no problems with girls, but the very thought of something greater than a normal conversation made me twitch. I would not have said no to a bit of practice. Just so you know, that does not apply to Eve O'Sullivan, though. Not one bit. Though, based on her chosen nick, Aphrodite, she may have had a different opinion. Still, I couldn't discount the possibility that she simply didn't know who that was. When I did dream of taking it further than a chat, it was always with Tissa Schaefer. And it just so happened that she was walking on the other side of the street with Ed and the other guys from the clan just then. They were talking loudly and laughing. Based on how they were barely moving their legs, they were all encumbered and heading to auction on the market square, to the smith or to a merchant stall to get rid of all their loot before another raid. They probably didn't have anything of value, maybe just a hunk of rusty scrap from the mine of the hyena-like gnolls. That was not the most complicated instance, but it had to be done for raiding the dungeon of the man-eating ogres where they were going. And maybe they were planning to go run the new inns in the Olton quarries, which everyone was talking about in school.
"Does she have to shake her thighs like that?"
Eve asked in annoyance, looking at Tissa. I led my gaze over Melissa's tall and well-proportioned figure, wrapped in the short white dress of a priestess of Nergal the Radiant, the main deity in this world. At the very least, it was the god with the most adherents, and thus faith points. I couldn't look away. It was a captivating spectacle, and only Eve's look of admonishment in the corner of my eye made me stop leering at Tissa Schaefer's backside. Here, all characters were an exact copy of the people who played them, but in the real world, Tissa never wore clothes like that. There, she usually loafed around in oversized pants and baggy hoodies, so I could only admire her here. And that was the only thing I liked about this game. Of all the players I knew in Tristad, only she and Ed Crawler Rodriguez had become mages. Magic was an inalienable part of the world. In theory, anyone here could master it, but it cost unspeakable sums of cash to learn. A tome of basic magic of any school cost at least 10,000 gold. That was approximately the same number of phoenixes, about the same as a flying car. But neither of them bought any tomes. Tissa randomly found a quest object that brought her on a long chain where the final reward was light magic training in the Temple of Nergal the Radiant. And Ed got the fire magic class supposedly after finding a tome as loot in an instance. Either fate had been kind to him, or he was just entitled to the loot as the clan leader. I didn't know for sure.
"I'm bored,"
said Eve, looking at me demandingly. "Do you want to take a walk around town?"
"Not really."
She shook her head, and I understood that I had guessed wrong. But I wasn't going to play her naive little flirting game. "Then let's please just sit quietly." Eve went silent. I would gladly have read something, but there was no way to bring stuff in here. This was a medieval fantasy world, where the highest technology available were primitive powder guns made by the gnomes and dwarves. So I'd have to read, or more accurately, reread the in-game encyclopedia. Gnomes provide the dwarves with various kinds of powder weapons, rifles, muskets, and even cannons, and they do not disdain steam power either, among other sorts of technology. Boring. Why should I care about steam power in the modern age when humanity had already begun colonizing the solar system? Damn, time was drawing on so long. Too bad I couldn't break up the required hour per day into several sessions. That was for health reasons. It was thought to be harmful to the psyche, constantly changing between realities. There were recorded cases where people didn't properly adapt after a vert session. In the game, they rakishly carry heavy two-handed swords, but in the real world, they were weaklings, which at times led people to overestimate their abilities and injure themselves. Feeling bored, I once again